Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome to this week's episode of Recover You. This is Kylene, and today I am doing a solo episode to answer some of your questions. I'm excited to just respond to some of the things that you have submitted, and I feel like with the Facebook group Recover You, temporarily, hopefully, crossing my fingers, being temporarily closed, I feel like it's even more important. I used that group to really interact with you one-on-one. And so while that is being disputed on Facebook, I want to make sure that I am able to directly answer your questions and offer some support. So I am going to also make sure that there is a link in the show notes if you are listening today and want to submit more questions and feedback about the podcast for the future. Please take a moment to do that. That link will be available in the show notes. And I may actually just try to keep that there for future episodes as well. We want to make sure that the lines of communication are open and that we are creating episodes that are pertinent and interesting and most supportive for you. So just take a moment to fill that out if you haven't already. And today I'm just going to look at some of the questions and give some of my perspective. I do want to preface these types of episodes with, when I answer questions submitted in this way, they are going to be both anonymous and my answers are going to be very general, right? So if I don't hit something that is specific to your situation, I'm going to try to answer as generally as possible with some of these concepts. It's hard to know exactly what your relationship is, when I just have a question, but I'll do my best. So with that being said, I do always encourage everyone to additionally work with someone one-on-one so that all of those specifics and those nuances can be answered for you specifically in a way that makes sense for you, your safety, your recovery, and your relationship. If you are looking for someone as a betrayed partner to work with one-on-one, there is also a link in the show notes to submit a connection or to book a connection call with me to see if we're a good fit. All right, so let's get started. We're going to start with, let's take a look here. This question submitted for those of us who have husbands that had affairs. How do you handle the pain of it not feeling like it was just sex? The phone calls, the lunch dates, and them telling another woman that they were happy in their marriage or that they were unhappy in their marriage with you. So I think the root of this question really is sort of what every betrayed partner struggles with, whether it was a physical affair, an emotional affair. Actually, I take that back because I think this one is separating. She's saying that it's how do you process the idea that they're telling you that it's just a physical affair and not an emotional affair. So I take that part back. But most betrayed partners are going to struggle with this, whether it's pornography or cyber sex or a physical affair. This concept of like, how do I deal with the fact that my husband was engaging in sexual behavior with a human that wasn't me, whether it was physical or virtual, right? And how do I wrap my mind around the idea, especially if there was physical interaction, with the idea that it was just a sexual act. It wasn't like this relational connection. And I know this person's specifically talking about physical affair. This does, I think, translate to partners who are trying to recover from virtual affair stuff as well, because I know that, when Patrick was engaging with real humans in live time online, there's a level of, typing back and forth communication interactions, sexting and things like that in that world that I had some of these same questions. One of the sticking points for me was really like, what was the communication? And thankfully I didn't push too hard on that. so that I didn't force him to tell me the types of things that he would say to these people. But it's always been something that's bothered me. That was one of the main triggers and pain points for me, was really thinking it was sexual interaction, but then there was some level of communication. And I think that hits betrayed partners really hard, because when you're married to someone and when you are committing your life to someone and being vulnerable and open and honest on your side of the street, when you realize that in some way, shape, or form, whether it was sincere or authentic or not, that your partner was opening up and communicating to other people, it's hurtful, you know? And there's a huge worry and a wonder there of like, what were they saying? And it sounds like this particular person has an idea of what they were saying, because they specifically asked about, how do you deal with the fact that this is an in-person thing. They're having phone calls, they're having lunch dates, and they're telling another woman that they're unhappy in their marriage with you. So first, I think it would be figuring out if that's true. Not that if it's true if he said that, but is that how he actually feels? There's a term, I think I've mentioned it in another episode, that I heard from another practitioner, called coining. And it's this idea that similar to a video game, or even different than a video game. Think about when you used to make payphone calls and you had to put the quarter in. And then you'd have so much time. And then in order to keep the phone call going, you had to keep putting the coin in, right? That's called coining. It's like you have to keep it going. And in order to do that, there's certain things that you need to do. So I think in some ways, for people that engage in affairs of any kind, but particularly in real life, there's this idea that they're going to do and say what they need to do and say in order to keep that game going, to keep that phone call going, to keep that fake separate life going. So if the affair partner is somebody that does want a little more affirmation, then your partner may be giving that to them, even though maybe that's not completely authentic to them. So I think the first thing would be sort of understanding where your husband is. If it was all was he emotionally involved? Was he really unhappy? Was he doing these things sincerely in any way, or was it all sort of in this under this umbrella of coining? The other thing I want to sort of pull apart, and by the way, none of this is your responsibility. So like if at any point you go, I don't really care if what he did was authentic or inauthentic, if it was emotional or not emotional, it's too much for me to deal with. Like that's okay, because all of it is betrayal and all of it is infidelity. So I always want to clarify that too. But if you're thinking of staying, you're trying to figure out, well, how do I process this? I think another thing to think about would be when he gets into recovery and his brain starts to heal and his body starts to heal and he starts to learn how to live life and feel his emotions. This concept of him being unhappy in the marriage with you, is that something where he still feels the same, where he goes, hey, yeah, I feel like we're just incompatible? Or is it really something where he goes, I was just doing what I needed to do and I got caught up in this thing that was fake, but now that I'm stepping into sobriety, I'm reminded of the beauty and the color and the vibrancy of real connection. And I understand that the relationship with you includes the ups and the downs. And I actually find beauty in that instead of being upset by it, right? So I think within the concept of addiction is this whole inability to handle real life, right? I mean, real life in real relationships, you're going to have stress, you're going to have anxiety, you're going to have conflict, you're going to have disagreements, you're going to have different personalities, you're going to want to spend time together and they're going to want to go do a hobby, right? Like, so there's a lot of conflict about roles in the house, about parenting, about all these things. That's real life. And when someone is not influenced by addiction and influenced by these high levels of brain chemicals being hit by fantasy type fake non-realistic moments in their life where they don't experience consequences or negativity or conflict, when they pull away from that kind of fake facade life, they're able to ground again and go, yeah, I understand that what I was doing was truly, it was truly, truly fake. And had I ever pursued an actual realistic relationship with that person, I would have ended up having the same struggles. So I think to answer this question, so I'm talking a little bit about the addiction side first here, but I do want to get back to the betrayed partner, because the reality of this is it all hurts. It none of this is easy. And regardless of whether your partner can come back and say, it didn't mean anything to me, I love you very much, or I was kind of caught up in this fake life and now I'm getting into sobriety and I'm seeing things differently. Understanding that can be helpful, especially if you're moving towards reconciliation, because you really do want to get an idea of what's in their head then and what's in their head now. But it doesn't take away the pain that they chose that behavior, they engaged in those behaviors, and all of that feels very, 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 very personal. And to validate this person's question, it will never feel like it was just sex to you, the betrayed partner. Even if it was to the person engaging in it and it was just a physical act, there was no emotional connection. Whether that is true or not does not mean that it doesn't feel differently to you. It doesn't hurt you. It's always going to feel personal and like it was more than that to you. So in terms of healing, I think there's a lot of things to do here. One of them is kind of what I was just talking about in terms of getting to understand the addict's side and their perspective so that we can ground ourselves in, this is how I feel, and understanding this is their reality. And if their reality maybe is different than how we're feeling, we can kind of begin working through and thinking through that. Communicating and connecting with your partner through this process is an ongoing practice of asking questions, of them learning how to be vulnerable and explain. It's also really important through this process that he takes responsibility over and over and over and over and over again, and really work to understand how you feel about it. Again, if your reality and his reality are very different, if he goes, it was just a physical thing, but to you, obviously this is hitting on an emotional level and there's no way around that for a betrayed partner. It's going to be very important if reconciliation is on the table that he's recognizing that and he's asking you questions and learning how to empathize with that, take responsibility for that, and apologize for that, and then work over time to rebuild the trust. So I think there's practical things, with an affair, right? Like one of the boundaries, obviously, for most people is as soon as you find out there's no more contact with the affair partner, that you're going to have access to phone history, text messages, emails, all these kinds of things, right? And then in terms of the personal healing for the betrayed partner, this is a multi-level process. So working with someone one-on-one to really dial into what are the beliefs and the pain points, the fears and the insecurities that this created in me or brought to the surface that already existed. So maybe there was some emotional insecurity, feeling some distance in the relationship, and then you find this out and it reiterates an internal subconscious belief that you're not good enough or that you're not lovable. Maybe there were some physical body image insecurities. Many of us struggle with that. And then the partner seeking sexual interaction with another person is really triggering to that fear, that insecurity. And it says, see, you really weren't good enough. Your body's not good enough. So working with someone to really identify in what specific way did this behavior hurt me? What are the pain points that are coming up to the surface? And then that coach, that practitioner, that therapist, then helping you reframe those, helping you subconsciously reprocess and heal those so that you can actually step into the identity and the belief and the truth that you are enough, you are valid, you are lovable, you are valuable exactly as you are, and actually getting to a place in healing where you really, truly on a subconscious level believe that, so it's in alignment. So you don't just know it, but you believe it. So working with someone in that area can be really, really helpful. So that you can identify all those pain points and then work through them. And then you have the practical side of, the different boundaries you're going to set in the relationship and in his healing and his recovery and those sorts of things. And then because sex was part of his acting out, physical interaction, I would imagine that there may even be a step-by-step, very basic, slow healing process for reconnecting the two of you in that area. So that would be also important to sort of work with someone, if at all possible, to help you. So as you are struggling with, okay, we're rebuilding trust. He's been in sobriety and recovery for this period of time. I logically know that I feel safe, but maybe my body doesn't feel safe right now. Maybe my body, every time I go to get intimate with my partner, thinks about and visualizes him sleeping with another woman. That's a really common thing that happens after affairs, is that intimacy becomes very difficult because the trauma of betrayal is so strong that your brain brings up a memory of that, or a visualization of that, or a trigger of that in your most vulnerable moments. So that's a really normal thing, is the safer you get and the more vulnerable you get, sometimes your brain will try to remind you, hey, like, this thing happened. Are you sure you want to move into this next phase of safety and vulnerability? Like, are you sure you're safe? So having somebody that can kind of work with you on your particular pain points, your particular insecurities, and how can you create safety in that area in baby steps. Patrick and I did a few episodes around sexuality. I believe it was last season, perhaps. I'll have to put those in the show notes, but that was our process. Even though he had not physically engaged sexually with other people, I still had a lot of blocks in re-engaging in intimacy, a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity, a lot of trauma for myself in that area. So I can only imagine when somebody's trying to reconcile with someone who has physically engaged with another person, that those same types of fears are going to be there. Now, not everybody experiences trauma the same way, so that may not be true for you. And if that's not true for you, that's okay. And if it is, I want to say there's no timeline for this that is right or wrong. So if you are someone that is like, man, I just feel like I see so many people recovering and re-engaging in intimacy, and this woman has forgiven her husband after he had an affair, and they seem like they have this really great relationship, and I just really struggle in this area, and I have a hard time engaging in intimacy, and my body can't relax, and my brain starts to really go 10,000 miles a minute. I want to reassure you that you're normal, and that this is okay, and that it's also it is something that can be overcome. And it would require both partners to be very, very aware of creating safety. So it can't be overcome if your partner is not creating safety for you. That's very important. He has to. He has to be consistent in his sobriety, in his recovery, and in his efforts to rebuild trust with you. And then the two of you together need to intentionally create safety in the bedroom, in creating intimacy, in creating physical reconnection. But I would encourage that starts with emotional connection first. So do you guys have a really strong foundation of communication, of honesty, of trust already? Then you can transfer that into communication around physicality. And I always encourage my clients to start with, what is the most basic behavior or interaction that is intimate on some level that feels uncomfortable to you? So sometimes that is, you might hear people say, well, I can technically have sex with my partner, but I cannot like sit across the table from them, hold their hands, and gaze into their eyes for 3 minutes at a time. That would feel incredibly uncomfortable for me. So we have to step back and go, okay, why could we have something like sex that's actually more vulnerable, that's more intimate, but we can't do something like look into somebody's eyes, right? So what is the most basic form of intimacy, the safest form of intimacy that feels uncomfortable for you? Is it holding hands? Is it hugging for 5 minutes without letting go? Is it eye gazing? Is it sitting there and receiving verbal compliments about your body from your partner? What are the most simplistic, basic forms of intimacy? And can we start there? And I frame it as a trauma exercise. When there's trauma present, when there's pain present, let's not go into it going, okay, we're going to do this thing and it's going to be super sexy and it's going to be amazing and we're going to laugh and there's so much pressure around that idea that sex is supposed to be this magical, wonderful thing. But if trauma is present, we have to get through the trauma first before that's even a possibility. So I really, really want to normalize that for you if this is something you're struggling with. So if we can start with the trauma exercise, then later that same type of behavior and exercise can be sexy, can be fun, can be more relaxing. But the first time you do it, I want you to view it very much as a trauma recovery exercise. This is not supposed to be this magical, sexy thing where everything is great, right? It's supposed to actually help you prove to yourself and together that this thing that you are afraid of or that feels uncomfortable is safe. So the other thing I want to mention with that is this requires communication between the two partners to be very good in terms of we really want both of you to approach this as a trauma exercise, understanding what the goal is, understanding what you want the outcome to be, and understanding how to do the exercise. So for example, if you're practicing receiving compliments, but there's a particular phrase that is triggering to you, your partner will need to know that, right? That there are guidelines around this exercise. His job is to create safety and comfort for you, to let you know how much he loves you and how much he values you and how safe you are, and to essentially prove that through this process, as you are literally dipping your toe into something that feels scary to you. And then once that happens and it's done carefully and intentionally and with safety, then you go, okay, I've experienced this. It was safe. Maybe we can do it again. And that might mean that you actually do the exercise itself again, or that might mean that you now that's something that's on the table for the future without any planning, and it can be more relaxed and more spontaneous and more intimate and connected. So I want to read the question again just to make sure I'm kind of hitting if there's anything else I kind of want to mention here. So for those of us who have husbands that have had affairs, so I'm assuming physical affairs, right? How do you handle the pain of it not feeling like it was just sex? The phone calls, the lunch dates, and them telling another woman that they were unhappy in their marriage with you. So I think I've tried to, again, these are sort of general answers. I think I've tried to generally answer that whole question. I hope that it hit the points that you were hoping. The emotional pain that we are going to experience and the personal betrayal that we are going to experience, that is something that on our side is going to require working with someone who can help us navigate the beliefs, the fears, the insecurities, and the lies that we've accepted about who we are, that betrayal then brought right up and said, see, that's true. You're just not good enough. So we want to make sure that those are addressed. That's going to help with the pain. Then we want to make sure that we understand our partner's perspective, also want to set boundaries there. And we really want to make sure that we sit back and watch them get into sobriety and recovery, give it enough time so that we understand, is this sincere? And then we really get an idea of what their patterns were like, why they engaged in that behavior, and how they really felt about it. So if it really was self-medicating pain, that we can then, even though it still feels personal, we can logically begin to understand, okay, it was a really, really inappropriate and hurtful medication that they were using, and they no longer need to use that medication because now they're in therapy, now they're in group, now they're talking about it. And then the re-engaging of intimacy is going to happen after both of you have worked on individual healing, and then really with very intentional baby steps work on reconnecting intimately after safety and trust has been reestablished, not before. And so then that process can build on itself, and you can really step into this idea of we're creating a new relationship, a totally brand new relationship. We're not trying to build on something that is broken, but we're actually going to work together to understand who we are today, who we want to be, and what we want to create together. And if it becomes just not doable for you at any point, I also want to sort of reiterate again, that is okay. Every individual is going to have certain red line boundaries that it's just for whatever reason, with our life histories, with our trauma histories, with our personal belief systems, with our woundedness, will be too much for us to overcome with that individual. It doesn't mean we can't heal, but it may mean we can't stay with that person in order to fully heal. And so all of those are viable options. So wherever you are, I just want to encourage you with that, that whatever road you take is going to be okay and that you will be okay as long as you continue to move down that path of healing and personal growth and working on that safety and that recovery for you as an individual first. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to answer one more question before I wrap up this episode. What do you do when your husband says he loves you but isn't in love with you anymore? So I first just want to pause and say I'm really, really sorry if that has been said to you. It's a really horrible thing to hear. It's a really horrible thing to say. It's a very unkind thing to say. I'm assuming that the person saying it is the one who cheated on you. And so that's super, super unhelpful. It would be almost more understandable for me if the betrayed partner was saying that, like, hey, I love you, but I'm not really in love with you right now because I don't trust you. Right. But I think terminology is really important. The Bible talks about the tongue being a double-edged sword, right? And things like that, and just how powerful our words can be. We talk about how they can really build someone up or they can really cut someone down. And if you are staying with someone in a relationship and you are reconciling, you really, the person that has done the betraying really needs to prioritize building their partner back up because they, with their behaviors, have just destroyed them and torn them down. And so words become very, very, very important. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm sorry that happened. And that's not fair and it's not nice on top of the betrayal itself. That's really cruel and unkind. I don't necessarily have an answer because what you do with that is really up to you. I just mentioned with the previous question, there isn't a right or wrong in terms of staying or leaving. I also think it's really important when we're navigating recovery for both individuals to be very specific about their terminology, right? So what does he mean by the word love and what does he mean by the term in love? Do the two of you have different definitions or perspectives of what that means? Do you have a story about what being in love means and why that's so hurtful to you and maybe he views it very differently? The other thing to think about is with addictive behaviors and affairs and pornography and all this kind of stuff, he may very much be confusing the concept of being in love with an extreme dopamine hit and this level of adrenaline that's literally not real life. Like, it's not sustainable. You cannot be in a realistic long-term relationship with somebody and have these adrenaline hits for 50 years. Like, it just doesn't work that way. But you can. So if he's associating this concept of being in love with someone with adrenaline rush, that's not being in love with somebody. So he may have a false sense that's very skewed from addictive behaviors and chemical rushes that aren't sustainable. So that's one thing. Being in love with somebody when you're married for decades and you fall more and more in love with somebody is more, I think, about seeing who they really are, deeply appreciating them, deeply respecting them, deeply loving them. It's like the longer you get to know each other and the more deeply you understand how they feel and who that individual is and how they think, your respect for that person and your connection for that person deepens. But that doesn't necessarily always correlate with like these magical butterfly feelings or this dopamine hit or this adrenaline rush. So I guess the first thing I would wonder is, did he say that like right after discovery and he's still in addict brain and still kind of in this rush of like fake fantasy world where things aren't real and he's used to like adrenaline hits and he thinks that's somehow sustainable? Has he taken that back? Has he apologized for that comment? What does he mean by those words? And then also, regardless of all of that, his thoughts, his beliefs, his feelings, his perspective, how do you feel about that? What does that mean to you that he said that to you? My perspective obviously is that that's very, very immature, very unkind, very unloving that he would say that out loud. And for you, is this something that you feel like you can move past, or is this something that will haunt you for the next 50 years? So for example, if you stay together and he gets into deep recovery and he proves over time with his behavior and his words, and he apologizes for what he said. And he says, I was speaking from an addict brain. Recovery's so much better. I didn't realize in that moment what recovery looked like or felt like. And now I realize how much better it is. And I really do love you. And I am falling in love with you. And it's so much deeper than what I thought when I said that. If he gets to that point and communicates in that way with you, is that enough for you over time to heal from that? Or even if he gets to this place of recognition that the relationship with you is so much healthier, so much better, so much more beautiful, and he communicates that over and over, even if he gets to that place, is that enough for you? Or will what he said, is that a deal breaker for you? So just a couple things to think about with that. Again, we have to be careful with our words on both sides. We have to be careful as betrayed partners that if we're working towards reconciliation, that we don't say things that we can't take back. And the same thing with the person who has done the betraying and the infidelity. We really have to be careful that, if you want any chance of saving this relationship, you've destroyed your partner with your behavior. You have to be incredibly careful not to destroy her with your words. In addition to that, there's only so much that somebody can bounce back from. And I think what I've seen over time is that betrayed partners are incredibly strong and incredibly resilient, but everyone has a line. And when that line is crossed over time and they've tried and they've tried and they've tried and they haven't received the same level of effort that they've put in, and they've given you opportunity after opportunity, and then you keep wasting it, there will come a time where they just disconnect and say, okay, I'm done. So if individuals don't want that to happen, relationships require intentionality and relationships require continual effort. And when you're tired and when you're fatigued and when you're overwhelmed, that can feel stressful, like the idea that relationships take work. But really, that's just the reality, is that the idea of a healthy relationship is that you're pouring positive things into that partner for a long time. And when it is balanced and when you're both in a place of recovery, you pour into each other in an equal level where one person's feeling fatigued or sick or overwhelmed and the other partner can sort of take over and encourage, and vice versa. And so it ends up balancing out. But during recovery, both people can feel very overwhelmed and fatigued, and it gets hard, and it is a lot of effort. But what I like to think about is with recovery is if you can have two people that view it like their job and focus on it like it's the most important thing in the world in this phase of your life, and the two of you are putting the same level of effort into it, it may take several years of stress and overcoming and hitting different bumps in the road and then working through those together, etc. But then you're facing decades of health, of balance, of stability, of safety, of connection, of just building on that, because it's like a diet. Like, it's scary and it's overwhelming at first, but then when you learn sort of, I can eat this, I can't eat this, like when I went gluten-free, right? Like, okay, well, what has gluten in it and what doesn't, and how does my body respond? When you learn all of those things, then it's just as easy as the life you were living before. But the change requires effort and intentionality, right? And the unfortunate thing about recovery is sometimes that effort and intentionality and that work and that processing takes several years. But if we can be really purposeful about that, then we're facing decades potentially of health, of safety, of deeper connection, and something that we couldn't maybe even imagine in the relationship we had before betrayal. So I think that's all that I would say in terms of that particular question. My heart goes out to you that was said to you. It's really unkind. It's really cruel. It's really, not loving, not thoughtful, not caring. I can see potentially maybe if that was said, within the first couple weeks or first month, right? Addict brain, confusion around adrenaline hits, confusion around what reality is, adrenaline seeking type behavior and patterns, how that could come out, and in recovery, how that could change. But I think ultimately what needs to happen is the betrayed partner in this particular situation. Let's work on your healing. Let's work on your self-confidence, your self-worth. Make sure you feel really, really valuable and worthy, so that you don't fall, you don't hear that and believe that. I would rather you hear that and be offended by that than hear that and believe that, something like you're not good enough for him to love. So if there's any part of you that hears that and then feels like, oh, I need to do more work, or I need to earn his love, or anything like that, let's work on that part of healing, because you are valuable, you are worthy, you are lovable exactly the way you are. So I would rather somebody hear that phrase, if they had to hear it at all, and be offended by that and go, excuse me, that's not fair. So definitely the personal one-on-one healing, maybe potentially the person who said it going through some deep healing, taking responsibility, apologizing, understanding your perspective, and then putting a whole heck of a lot of work in to undo that statement and to repair. But I can absolutely see where that would definitely take some time with the betrayal, and then that phrase on top of it. It's going to take some work to repair that rupture in the relationship. Well, those are the two questions I'm going to answer for today. I will put the link in the show notes. Again, I'm sorry about the Facebook group. If you are a member in that, I'm still, kind of working through trying to get that back up. And I definitely want to keep the lines of communication open, the support open. So if you are looking to work with someone one-on-one, the link is in the show notes. But if you want to submit a question for the podcast, that link is also in the show notes as well. So we are here to support you and encourage you on your journey. And I hope that you have a great day. Remember that every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. So make that choice today, and we will see you next week.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.